Hello everyone, I'm George from Ireland. So this is a video about the River Thames. So here I am at Old Father Thames, this river that flows through my life, and I'm here at Teddington Lock, where you can walk across. You can see this little beach here created by the 8. An 8, spelled A-I-T or E-Y-O-T, is an island on the River Thames, and only in the River Thames. So there are hundreds of 8s on the River Thames. So some Anglo-Saxon word, and the word Eton, the toponym Eton, is derived from that partly. Anyway, so a few of these 8s are inhabited, this one is not. A few of them help to form part of a bridge, as this one does. I'm on a pedestrian bridge. You're not allowed to cycle across. Fortunately, I never ever have. But you're allowed to wheel your bicycles across. Anyway, Teddington is a significant spot, and I'll explain why in a moment. So there's the weir you can see up behind me. So we're looking west that way, and the River Thames, well, it rises at Thames Head in Gloucestershire. It's 215 miles from the source of the River Thames to the mouth of the River Thames. Now it's debatable where does the Thames actually meet the sea, because the estuary is rather large. And the Thames is never that deep, nor is it incredibly wide until you get the bit where it's the sea, really. I mean, even at its widest point in London, it's not even a mile wide. Perhaps I shouldn't be dealing in these imperial measurements, use avoirdupois. Yeah, now Teddington is important because the Thames is a tidal river up until this point. So the North Sea is flowing in, and you'll see the river level go up and down dramatically. It changes in the day a lot. In central London you say, wow, that's just a dribble, the water level is so low. And then a few hours later it's quite high. And that's because that's seawater coming in. And then obviously there's a turn of the tide and it flows out. And it'll actually be quite sudden. I've seen it when it burst its banks at Twickenham a few months ago, how it was up on the street, the water level, and then the water level receded and it started going down. Oh yeah, and here, by the way, is a very charming riverside pub. The Anglers. An angler means someone who's fishing with a fishing rod. And so this pub, you can come out right out to this bit here, and then and there is a bit of a beach, not a very sandy beach. Now you're not supposed to swim in the Thames for various reasons. There's Weil's disease, which comes from rat's urine. So yes, there are a few water rats around. Now if you cut yourself and get rat's urine in your wound, that can make you very ill. I don't know if it can kill you. So this is Teddington, this area, and so that is not tidal as you go further west. That's too far in from the sea. Now, I can't guarantee that not a drop of seawater gets further west at this point, but broadly speaking, this is the cut-off. And then there's even Tide End Cottage over there. It's a pub, it's just out of sight to mark that's the end of the tidal Thames. So they said that if you throw a bottle into the Thames, don't do that, don't litter, but it will take years to reach the open sea, because it'll flow out with the river a few hundred meters and then come almost as far back with the tide a bit later on. So that is about Old Father Thames. So it's limned much in literature. John Burns, that 19th century socialist politician, said it was a liquid history, and very significant river it is too. So it goes back, well, to ancient Roman times. It's called something like this, Tamesis they call it in Latin, or that's of the Thames really, and it's the same in most languages. There is a town called Thame, T-H-A-M-E, but it is actually pronounced like that. Obviously the T-H in Thames is not pronounced as a T-H, it's pronounced as a T. So there are various towns which are known as upon Thames, as Richmond upon Thames, which is very close to here, as opposed to Richmond, Virginia, or Richmond in Yorkshire, which is the original Richmond. And there's, they sometimes say Staines upon Thames. There's Kingston upon Thames, which lies about 2 miles yonder, just out of sight, to avoid confusion with Kingston, Jamaica, and so forth. There's Thames Ditton. I can't think of anywhere else with the name Thames in it. So this was the real highway of southern England until the 18th century, when canals were built very substantially. Obviously the canals often connected to here, and that's when the transport revolution got roads improved enormously, because almost nothing had been built in terms of roadworks since the Romans had left 1300 years earlier. And so Turnpike Trust improved those as private businesses. And obviously the coming of the railways in 1825 really reduced river transport. But as I said, the roads were in such parlous condition that often people had to go by river. Sometimes things were flooded, well, there was a flood, so therefore the bridge is underwater during these inundations. The Thames used to flood regularly until the 1980s. Some quite bad floods in 1928, 1947 likewise, and then the Thames Flood Relief Barrier was built near the mouth of the River Thames. In 1981 it was opened, if I recall correctly, and it was opened by Ken Livingstone, the then leader of the Greater London Council. There was no mayor of London back then, and he had Princess Anne come and help him open it. And despite him being an outspoken anti-monarchist and saying she was of no earthly use, however, he was all smiles, very courteous to her on that day. So the Thames Flood Relief Barrier has just been occasionally overtopped. So the embankment was only built in the 1860s in the centre of London, and until then the Thames was about twice as wide as it is now in the centre of London, and it regularly flooded. You might notice a lot of 19th century houses have several steps up from the street to the main door, and that was because of flooding. So there's been no serious flooding around the Thames since then. I remember in 2013, yes, there was quite a bit of flooding, but I don't think a single person drowned. It wasn't very destructive. And that's partly because of the Thames Flood Relief Barrier. But yes, there might be torrential rain, but they don't have the tide coming in at that point. They're able to keep it out, or at least almost all of it out. What else should I point out about the Thames and flooding? And it's here that that whale came all the way up in the Thames. Was trapped here a couple of months ago, but then was it even killed? It certainly died, but I have a feeling that people killed it for some reason. And there were boats here looking for it, so that's it. So you're not allowed to jump in, and you can see lots of canal boats. Some people actually live in these things, so someone of my height wouldn't be able to stand up in it properly. And they have to be quite narrow, not too long. And there are not many places they can turn all the way around, but you can live in them year round. The only thing is you can't have them moored all the time to pay for mooring. And look at the locks they go through. The locks obviously to do with changing the water level. So what else are I going to say about them? And then you have to, if you only live in a canal boat, you have to have pump out to pump out your effluent, and then you have to have a separate tank for your diesel. But and the diesel thieves will come along in the middle of the night, and they'll try and pump it out without you realising, especially if your boat is unmanned. Well, I went to an Edinburgh show, and the comic there, he had one of these canal boats, but he'd been ingenious, so he'd swapped the labels for pump out and diesel. So that night he got a free pump out, and well, the thieves, their diesel tank had some trouble after that. Anyway, so this is the Thames, the tow path. You can walk, cycle, or jog up. And they've got it on the other side as well. However, you can't go all the way along. A bit further up there, beyond Kingston, near Thames Ditton, some of it's privately owned, so you wouldn't be able to go right beside the River Thames if you got to that area. What else might people like to know about the River Thames? Well, it's a living river. It was a dead river in the 1950s because there's so much pollution and so much of that coming from factories. But the deindustrialization of the United Kingdom has led to the added benefit that this has become a live river again, as in fish can live in it. There are many aquatic birds as well because of that. So there has been an upside to this. All right, so perhaps that's enough for me about the River Thames and this delightful 8 here at Teddington. So toodaloo, and please subscribe. That's all from me. Goodbye.